I'm Stila Webb.
And I'm Shuvom.
I'm going to write my first fiction novel this year.
And I'm going to film it.
And we're going to release one video each week.
And if you keep up with Stila's word count, by the end of 2017, you'll have...
Makes the whole thing, cooler. It needs to be about 20% cooler.
Alright, 10%ers. Today we're going to talk about something important for your book. And once again, we have our special guest, Chandler Gabel.
Hi everybody, good to be here.
Yay!
Yay! So today we're going to talk about finding the C in your book. So finding the C... So of course, when we talk about finding the C, we mean finding the cool in your book. Finding out what makes your book engaging to the reader and then highlighting that and only putting that in, or making sure that stands out.
Now, Shuvom, by that do you mean what makes your book different from other books of its type?
No, I mean the exact opposite. We're not trying to make your book a special snowflake that is so different. Like, let's say you're writing a mystery, and you're like, my mystery is going to be different from every other mystery. It's not going to have a killer, and it's going to have really a bunch of confusing clues that don't lead to anything, and at the end it'll all be an accident, and the main character doesn't solve the crime.
So, late Agatha Christie books.
A lot of first-time authors have the unique-itis problem where they're trying to break the conventions of genre so much that it's not in that genre anymore.
The problem is they don't know the conventions of the genre like they think they do, so they end up breaking it badly.
Yeah. And this is not to say that your story has to be locked into a particular genre, but you have certain expectations of what's cool about that and what you want to get out of it, and your readers do too. So this is going to be about making sure you meet those expectations and, still writing a story that's unique to you, but which pays off for the reader in the ways they're hoping it will.
So we've got 3 people here writing 3 different types of stories, and we're going to go through them and kind of see how to tactically put the scenes and descriptions and dialogue to make that type of thing cool. So we're going to start with Chandler.
Yes.
So Chandler's writing a kind of Cthulhu, kind of Lovecraftian type of story where a mist came over America, the continent of America, and people who were inside the mist just stopped communicating. You don't know what happened to them. And so it's like 100 years later, or how long?
Yeah, 50 years.
Yeah, so it's like 50 years later, the mist is kind of starting to clear from the higher areas, and Britain is kind of repopulating America using airships and mountain resorts.
Yeah. Very exciting stuff. No alarming contact. So it's a Lovecraftian story. I'm trying to create the fear of the unknown. We don't know what's in the mist. The characters don't know what's in the mist. We fear it.
What is it about Lovecraft that is good?
Yeah. Okay. So Chandler, when you're writing a Lovecraft story, when you're reading a Lovecraft story,
right,
what makes it cool? What makes it kind of pop?
Well, one of the things that really defines Lovecraft is that you can't see the monster, or at least you can't see the monster for the most of the book. If you read some of Lovecraft's original stuff, the big pop at the end is when you can actually see the monster. So for most of it, you're going through it and you don't see the monster. What you see in my story is the mist. These people are traveling through a misty New Hampshire, and there might be shadows in the mist just out of reach, or they might,
noises, or
and there's a weird noise where they see something in a window, but it's nothing you can grab hold of.
And every time you go into the mist and come back, you come back a little changed or different or something. And so the reason we're doing this video is, if you're writing Lovecraft fiction, one, you have to realize that's what makes it cool, but then tactically you have to make sure that you don't show the monster.
It's just like what ruined Signs and what made Aliens so good was, in Signs, it was terrifying to get glimpses of the aliens. It was horrifying to just see the hand or to see the shadow walk by. And then as soon as you saw it, you're like, oh, it's kind of goofy looking. That's not very scary. Whereas in Alien, they did the same thing. Even though Geiger's stuff is terrifying, you still could not see it for huge swaths of time.
Yeah,
just
it was just a shadow,
or a
shadow
or a claw or a mouth would come out and horrify somebody, and that's what made it so good all the way through.
That's what I'm trying to create. Is the monster is scary, yes, but what's even more scary is what you don't know.
So that's one thing. What else is cool about Lovecraft specifically?
Yeah, one of the things that I love about Lovecraft is the concept of terrible truths. The idea is that there are these facts out there, and if you learn these facts, you'll go mad. So a lot of the fun in the story comes from the idea that the characters are just this close to learning the terrible truths and going violently insane. And as the reader, you sort of, if the author has done his job right, you come to feel like you're just a little bit too close to realizing these terrible truths.
Yeah. And yet the curiosity pushes you forward, and you can't help but look.
Yeah. But there's something, you've got the monster you can't see, you've got a terrible truth hidden off stage, But tactically, there's something else you have to do with how the characters react and what the characters do.
That's right. So, you know, how do you make this scarier and scarier to the reader? Well, you have to strike a balance, right? And most good fiction is about striking a balance. And I think with Lovecraft fiction in particular, you have to strike a balance between characters putting themselves in danger and characters being intelligent enough so that you don't lose interest in their fate. If the characters are too stupid and they go, like, running off into the dark looking for Cthulhu, then... like, you're not going to care when that guy dies, right? Cthulhu comes out and eats him. It's like, well, good riddance to him. He lacked common sense. But on the other hand, if the guy just says, Cthulhu, I've dealt with this before, and then 5 minutes later the Cthulhu threat is ended, that's not fun either. So you need to find that balance.
That's actually one of the things I like the most about Cthulhu is people are making rational decisions. I'm going to go get a gun. I'm going to use the gun against them. Yeah, no, that doesn't work.
It makes it worse.
That makes it worse. Yeah. And there's just nothing you can do. There are no right choices outside of don't be involved.
Right, right. That's one of the best things about Lovecraft,
Yeah, so, again, tactically, as an author, you have to realize what these terrible truths are. You have to plan them out ahead of time. What is the terrible truth? Oh, there was a whole civilization that lived in Antarctica thousands of years ago and it's coming back to life, or whatever the truth is. Fish people are interbreeding with normal people. Spoilers for Lovecraft, I guess. You have to figure out the terrible truth first, but then how do you balance what would a character do that's smart, but the character still gets defeated by the terrible truth? You know, you gotta balance that. Especially now, where you guys should be in the bad guys close in, getting to the climax, they should be close to the terrible truth, kind of figuring it out. They should have a plan, but you as a writer should know how that plan's gonna go poorly. To make it a Lovecraft type of fiction or horror. But one thing about this sort of stuff is you have to have for every genre a certain set of scenes that have to be in the book. So one of the scenes I think that has to be in a Lovecraft book is one person seeing a horror that no one else in the group sees.
Yes, because now again as the author you can't show the horror because then it loses its effectiveness. But if one character sees the horror and the others don't, and the guy appears into the dark and then he staggers back saying, "Madness, madness, the colors," and everybody else says, "What are you talking about? What colors?" Then you as the author have the fun of like making what he's saying as vague and terrifying as possible. And then hopefully the reader will be put in the position of the characters who didn't see the terror, and they'll be trying to figure out and understand what he could do, you know, what he saw too.
If you're writing a horror story, think about what is expected of the genre for your type of horror.
Yeah, definitely one thing that people do kind of expect when they are reading Lovecraft is maybe this narrator isn't what he seems. It doesn't have to be there, but you know that's something that people will have fun with if you're writing that kind of story.
Yeah, and Chandler's taking it to the next level by having 2 levels of unreliability, so you really have the ground shifting underneath you. The reason we're doing this and going through 3 different genres is so you can kind of see how it applies to your genre, whatever you're writing at home. And again, you can always email us at hey@getwriting.lang and we can help you more. Stila, you're writing an urban fantasy, so I hear.
Basically, yes.
So, what is it required to be cool in an urban fantasy? What does urban fantasy have to have?
The first thing is a secret world somewhere beneath our own that is hidden, just out of view, that you want to bring the reader into to make them feel like they're in somewhere new and cool and secret.
Yeah, that they're part of a special club that knows how to get to the fairy world or how to get to the Smurf world or whatever.
Yeah, it's always another world living underneath or in the shadows of the real world.
And that's a balancing act as well, right? Because if it's too grounded in the real world, then it's not fun and cool and you're not part of an exclusive club. But if in Chapter 1 everybody steps through a magic mirror and now they're in Narnia, then it's not based in the real world.
Yeah, you lose the urban feel of it. You lose the feel that it's just underneath our normal. Our normal world is more magical than you think, and that's how I describe it. Is our normal world is more magical if you just see it the right way.
Yeah, the balance is between the known and the unknown, the new and the familiar. And if there's too much of the familiar, then you feel gypped that you're not spending any time in getting to know the new world. But if you spend too much time in the new world, then what's the point of even placing the real world in juxtaposition of it? There might as well just be an actual epic fantasy. So you have to balance the two with realism, and yet the magic world is intruding on it in some way and making it more perilous.
Yeah. Yeah, that's why Buffy the Vampire Slayer works so well, is because she had to be a vampire slayer while also dealing with all the high school bullshit.
Yeah, there's usually that intrinsic subplot of you have to keep it hidden.
Yeah.
So there's that extra level of danger because you can't have the two mixing. You can't have normal people learning about the vampires or they'll get eaten.
For some reason, yeah.
And yeah, and you can't have the authorities find out because then they'll, arrest you and you'll be in jail because they saw you murder somebody even though it was actually a vampire and now you can't save the world. So there's always that balancing and the tug and the pull of the two different sides.
Yeah. So again, as a writer, you have to, one, realize this is what's cool about your genre, and then two, work it into every scene. So you have to, after every big fight scene, I'm assuming she's doing stuff to kind of keep herself hidden, avoiding the authorities. You can't just go to the police. So it affects tactically what you do.
Keeping the magical world separate in medieval times or the Victorian era really wasn't that big a deal. But now with constant surveillance, with cell phones, with video cameras in everybody's pocket, with social security numbers and all this other stuff that makes it very difficult to hide, it becomes 10 times harder to have both worlds and keeping the one hidden and your activities with it hidden.
The other requirement we find for some reason in urban fantasy a lot is the main character has to be a normal person in normal life, but in the mythical world, she's a special girl that is the long-lost princess that only that girl can save them.
Shuvom loves that kind of book.
Ah!
Basically, this is the fantasy of the urban fantasy, because this is a fantasy trope. Because who do you want to follow when you're reading a fantasy novel? Well, you want to follow the cool special person. You don't want to follow the butcher down the street who just watches the special person do stuff.
And you have to have someone tell the main character, you have more power than you even know.
That's going a little far.
Writing pro tip. Pro tip.
Pro tip.
If you watch the first Harry Potter movie, every time they play the Harry Potter theme song is when this scene happens. When Harry discovers a new layer of the magical world. Yeah. So it happens over and over again in the first Harry Potter.
Well, and it keeps happening because new things are introduced and he learns about new things, and through him the readers get to learn and experience something new, so that the magical world never becomes boring and old hat.
There's always
you never
new parts.
really become familiar with it. You're familiar with parts of it, but every time you become familiar with one part, you need to learn about a new part.
Yeah. So when you're plotting your book out, one good way to plot it is kind of have real world and fantasy world, and then make sure your story kind of starts off in the real, dips in the fantasy, comes back, starts off in the real.
It's just like pacing, when we talked about how you pace your book, where you have to have some action and then you have to give it some downtime. That's exactly what this ends up being, is you want to pace this out so you've got time in the real world and time in the fantasy world in exactly the same idea. So it's like, oh, this is where I calm down, everything's kind of cool. Oh no, craziness, craziness. Okay, we're calming down, we're back to familiarity. No, we're back into the things we don't understand what's happening. Okay, we're back to somewhere normal again. So you can actually have it go with the pacing of the actual action of the book too.
And rewind back to Chandler's thing. We talked about scene, sequel scene, and like how Jim Butcher does stuff. The thing about Chandler's type of horror, it's all about anticipation.
Yeah.
So every scene should be stretching out the anticipation.
Yeah.
Every time you answer a question, you should ask another. You should introduce another more dangerous question to anticipate going forward.
Yeah, each answer should end up revealing a bigger question.
Yeah.
I think this is a good time.
For me to get a drink of water.
No! Alright, so we actually have enough viewers. We have a sponsor for a second time.
Yeah.
So and this week,
Yeah!
we are sponsored by Shitty Over Description. If you want your character to feel something and, have a certain emotion, make sure you describe it 5 times and the reader knows exactly how they feel over and over again.
This is actually what makes the work of Lionel Fanthorpe so brilliant, because he'll have a scene where the heroine brushes her teeth, and you might think, like, I know she brushed her teeth, but did she brush all of her teeth? And oh yeah, he tells you, she brushed them all for pages.
And not only do you know it happens, but the narrator explicitly tells you it happens. The character doesn't explain this to you or express it to you. No.
No.
The narrator tells you, just to make sure you understand.
Yeah, Shitty Over Description. Why show that your character will never give up? Just have the narrator say, this character would never give up.
You can find it wherever fine books are written. Shuvom.
Yeah, so Shuvom, tell us about your book.
Military science fiction.
Yeah.
Now, Shuvom, I just want to introduce your book briefly. You're actually writing a series, right?
Yeah.
You're writing it's called Infinity Squad. The first 2 books are available now. Highly recommended.
First one's free on Amazon. Shuvom.
I don't just say this because he lets me do the videos with him. They're actually very good, and they involve like a squad of interstellar diplomats, right? And so there's action.
They're diplomats in the second one.
Yeah,
Diplomats.
They're soldiers in the first one. Yeah.
Yeah, so soldiers turn diplomats. There's a lot of action. There's a lot of intrigue. It starts out as sort of Catch-22 in space, and then it just rolls on from there. So you're seeing stuff that we've seen before, right? There's diplomacy in action, but it's in this new sci-fi setting.
And get this, people get resurrected into new bodies every time they die.
So military science fiction, if you're writing it, has to have a techno fetish on the weapons and the battle systems. If you didn't have the fetish part, it would just be a military period piece back in World War II or Vietnam. But what you have to have, I started to realize, is usually it's done with like battle armor, where you set up kind of a baseline of what the reader knows is military technology, and then you have this battle armor or something come in, and you describe it in loving detail, and you show like how much cooler it is than normal technology. The first couple chapters of Starship Troopers do this exactly. You want the reader to go, oh, I want that gun, or I want that armor.
And that sustains them through the next 137 pages of history and moral philosophy.
Yeah, exactly. So you have to have that. And the weird balance to strike here is all military fiction has to be about how war is hell. Like the soldier on the ground, you know, it's a horrible thing to kill your fellow man and to be forced in a situation. You have to have that war is hell, but you have to balance it with war is really, really cool.
Yeah.
Like they're reading the book.
It's hell, but it's really cool hell.
Yeah. And so this was a problem for me in Infinity Squad 1, where you had to make the battle scenes really cool while sustaining an anti-war message. Because if you have a pro-war message, it's a really weird military sci-fi book. You can't do that.
It just feels dirty, though.
Yeah, it feels exploitative.
It feels a little dirty.
Yeah, it feels like exploiting it. So you have to have an anti-war message, but the battle scenes have to be really, really cool. So weird juxtaposition. The other thing that has to happen is, in the battles, the hero has to win because they make a smart plan and they use their weapons correctly, but then the villain does something unexpected and they're failing, and the hero has to reach deep down and like grit and like be tough and win finally through that. That has to happen. If you have a big climactic battle and the hero's like, haha, fooled you, and without shedding any blood, people feel cheated.
Yeah, so the hero can't win easily, even though they've got the best possible weapons, they've got the best possible strategy. It feels like a cheat, right?
Yeah. Well,
it becomes a heist movie when you have it that way. When they win just by subterfuge and being clever, that becomes like a heist movie type of thing.
Yeah.
It's a completely different genre.
Different genre, different
yeah.
expectations.
Well, but also, I mean, the hero doesn't have the best weapons. The hero thinks they have the best weapons going into the climax, and we're going to talk about this in the next video. You have what's called a high tower surprise, where you have level 3 weapons, and you're like, oh, level 3 weapons are awesome. And the villain realizes they show up and they have level 5 weapons. You're like, oh no! And the hero has to do something smart, but also tough. They have to reach deep down and win with their level 3 weapons somehow. They have to make a sacrifice or something. And that's exactly what happens in Infinity Squad 1. And it happens in Starship Troopers. It happens in Armor by John Staley.
If you think about where military sci-fi has its roots, and that's in the military culture that we have now, you can really see why grit would be so important, because that's what the best military personnel are trained for. They train with grit. When you talk to Marines, it's about grit. It's about that stick-to-itiveness, the ability to take this horrible beating, but keep going and get to the objective.
Yeah. We want to believe that the Marine on the ground makes more of a difference than the Air Force lieutenant just pushing a button in a bunker, air-conditioned bunker somewhere. Even though in real war, it's probably the guy pushing the button that kills more people and makes a bigger change than the one lone guy on the ground. But in military sci-fi, that lone guy on the ground, there has to be a, oh, your fancy weapons have failed us, now the real soldiers take over, you know, let's...
Yeah, it can't be the guy behind the desk, it can't be the general, it has to be the grunt on the ground.
Yeah, it can't be like the big guy, scientist with the big brain winning at the end. It has to be the scientist with the big brain can team up with the gritty soldier Marine and do it. But if the scientist wins by himself, you feel cheated.
So notice that what Shuvom is talking about is how the expectations and requirements of your reader might diverge from reality. You're not necessarily trying to write the book to be as realistic as possible.
Yeah. Yeah, you're trying to, and Stila has a great analogy for this, you're trying to follow a recipe, And people are buying into a genre to get a certain recipe, and you have to give them kind of the ingredients to that recipe. And this isn't about, again, being a cookie cutter or, you know, it's just satisfying the reader's expectations.
Yeah.
Fiction is basically just fantasy. Genre fiction is escapist fantasy. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's what we go to movies for. That's what we read books for. That's comic books. That's video games. It's all an escape and a vacation from yourself. And you have certain vacations that you want to take. Some people like to go to the beach. Some people like to go to the mountains. So when it comes to genres, you want to make sure that you're giving your reader what they want out of your book. So when you're presenting it, you have to be sure that you're saying correctly what is in your book. You know, an urban fantasy has certain ingredients. So you want to make sure that those are the ingredients you're giving to your reader. You want to satisfy that expectation. You don't want to give them a bait and switch and be like, hey, I'm selling chocolate chip cookies. Just kidding, it's oatmeal with wheat germ in it.
What's your analogy, Kitty?
Chocolate chip cookies!
Yeah!
And they want quality. They want things that are new and different, but they also want things that are the same. It has to be different but the same.
Okay, homework time. So how do people figure out what is cool about the thing they're writing? If you're kind of scrambling for what are the common scenes that I have, or what are the common themes, read 3 or 4 books and movies in your genre, and then you can see the commonality come out. That's the best. That's the first thing, is read a lot in that genre.
Well, and furthermore, ask yourself, what do you enjoy about it? What do you want to get out of it when you read it? Like, what separates a good Lovecraft story from a bad one, for example?
Yeah, so analyze as you're reading. So step 1 is read a lot in your genre.
Yep.
What's step 2, kiddies?
You want to make sure you go back through your story and what do you have that fits into the genre you've decided you want to write.
Yeah, what's step
What's
1?
missing?
Yeah, so step 3 is looking at and we'll do this in the editing, when we do story grid, looking at every single scene in your book in a spreadsheet, and writing down what aspect of the cool that you're putting in. Am I putting in a cool techno-fetish scene? Where you see the battle armor for the first time? Am I putting in a cool fight scene where they think they're going with level 3 weapons, and the enemy comes out with them level 5 weapons, and they have to scramble? You have to do this stuff on purpose.
Yep, we keep preaching that. You've got to be purposeful. You got to know what you're aiming for, and you got to know how to get there.
Yeah. So good news. I'm also back on the horse with you guys now. So I'm going to try and do I'm going to try and do the 500 words a day with you guys as well.
Yeah.
So my current word count is 72,267 words. So you'll see that kind of go up as we go through. I'm not halfway through the book yet, so I'm probably looking at a 150,000 word book. So I might finish a little later than you guys because I'm writing a longer one. What's your current word count?
62,876 as of today.
Yay.
And I'm, in the Bad Guys Close In, I am anticipating about 90,000 words.
Yeah.
Is about where I'm going to go with the first draft.
Yeah, I realized we relaxed with the word counts with the last couple of videos.
Yeah,
so we're going to put
they've
those
been
word
busy.
counts on there again. Keep us honest. And Chandler, you're about like 20,000, 30,000 words into your thing? Or?
Yeah, I'm about 20,000 in, I guess. I'm aiming for maybe 25 to 30 when it's done, so it's getting pretty close.
Yeah, it's a short story, and you've already got the first draft done. You're kind of redoing it. So
yeah.
We'll keep you up here on Chandler's word count if Chandler comes back.
Yay. I'm going to build anticipation for that. It's a terrible truth.
This is the middle of the year. This is the 26th episode. We are halfway through the year, halfway to getting your book done and complete. And we only have 1 month left to finish up the word count. I'm going to be back on Camp NaNoWriMo for July. So if you want to write with me, I'm Stila at Camp NaNoWriMo. So just look up Camp NaNoWriMo. I'll put a link down below. In Camp NaNoWriMo, you can pick your goal. I'm picking 20,000 words. I want to get the 20,000 words done in July.
We've got 1 month left of actual writing, and then we're going to do editing for a couple of months. So we're going to talk about in detail, in depth, how do you order words in a paragraph, what do you leave in, what do you do on each editing pass. We're going to go in depth in that, as Stila does it for her book.
Yep, we're going to be going back over a lot of topics we've already talked about. We're going to show you how it applies to editing. And we're actually going to show you with my text how we're changing things.
Yeah, for example, dialogue is what I'm looking forward to. You know, we might bring Chandler back. You know, we'll show you some of her before dialogue, and then we'll show you some of her after
And then
dialogue.
we'll workshop some of it, because some of it's going to be bad. My plot's going to suck balls.
No, don't say that.
Usually does.
Let's not speak that into the world.
So until then, get writing.
Dot Wang.
So until then, get writing.
Dot Wang.
I knew it was coming this time.